Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Diplomatische Akademie Wien. We are one of the co-hosts of this panel discussion on challenges for journalists in conflict zones. I'm happy that we do this together with the Alumni Association of this academy and also together with the Rotary Club Teresa, a Rotary Club which has some sort of relations also with this place here because it was founded here in the rooms of the Diplomatic Academy. The topic that you will discuss tonight is certainly one where there are many angles to look at. When we look at here from the Diplomatic Academy, it's obvious. It's about international relations. And what is the role of media in international relations? What is the role of journalists in international relations? And from our point, or even my point of view, it is so obvious that the more turbulent our geopolitical situation becomes, the more important are reliable media. And reliable media needs journalists who are in a position to work independently and in a reliable way. So point number one. Point number two is, and that's, I'm not so sure about it, where we're outside of such halls, this is also true. The concept of freedom of press is a universal commitment. It's a universal commitment. It's not a commitment of a few democratic countries, but it is a universal commitment, and every day we see, not only in conflict zones, how much this is trespassed and what really happens to journalists in this area. And my third point is really something that we also have to talk to our students about. That's conflict zones for journalists and for media are everywhere. Everywhere. It's not something that happens in Gaza or in Ukraine only. It happens everywhere. I'm not talking about Austria. We are in a bit of a different situation, but also we have ups and downs in this conflict zone. The last ones in Austria was, happily we got a Freedom of Information Act, which was decided end of January in Austrian Parliament. Unhappily, we have a discussion now how much of legal documents during a court case can be used by journalists or not used by journalists. It's not yet decided whether there will be a change. But you see, the conflict zones are everywhere. I do know for your discussion it's not very helpful for me saying that this is a universal problem, but it is a universal problem. And my really last point was I was Austrian ambassador in Moscow in a time when so many journalists were either killed or detained or thrown out of this country that I'm one of those who can tell you that even if you are committed as a government officially, it doesn't mean much. It depends really on the reality on the ground, how we can make sure that journalists are the safe side of all of this. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm happy that we can join forces with our alumni club and also with the Rotary Teresa. Welcome from my side.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador Brix, for your introduction. Welcome, everybody. This is an event that we have been organizing together, the club.da, the alumni club of the Diplomatic Academy, together with the Rotary Club Vienna, Theresia. Our club is one of the oldest alumni associations in Austria. It was founded in 1969. We have now almost 1,900 members in over 100 countries. We do different things. We like to connect and reconnect the alumni with the students here at the Academy and also the faculty. So it's about networking, but it's also about career services. We have a so-called signature event every year where we put together a number of organizations and businesses with students. This year we had about 22 different organizations represented here and about 100 students. 600 bilateral talks took place in one afternoon. It's like professional speed dating. The club also gives scholarships since the academic year 2011-2012. We have spent over 100,000 euros and given 4 to 5 scholarships every year. Alumni are from 130 countries, and about 60% of the alumni are also a member of our club. And of course, we invite everybody who is a student here to join the club after graduation. As you can see, the motto of the club is no longer here. It's your home after graduation. As I said, we have been organizing this event already last year, and we want to make it an annual event. We find it important to celebrate, if we can say that, this World Press Freedom Day, which was introduced in 1993 by the UN General Assembly upon an idea of UNESCO. And the central point is really that democratic societies do need a free, pluralistic, and independent media. I give the word to you now.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Brigitta. So as president of Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia, it's a huge honor and pleasure for me, and also as an alumna of the Diplomatic Academy. We just talked about it before with Ambassador Brix, to welcome you all on behalf of my club, and in line with what Brigitta Blaha has explained about the club.da, let me briefly introduce our Rotary Club. We are an international English-speaking Rotary Club founded during the Corona times in 2020. Over 40 members from approximately 20 countries, covering almost all continents, so truly international. We were founded at the Diplomatic Academy, and around half of our current members are graduates of the different programs of the Diplomatic Academy. And to underline our strong connection to the Diplomatic Academy, we have a very successful collaboration agreement, part of which is the organization of joint panel events. We have the World Press Freedom Day event, and on the occasion of International Women's Day, a joint panel discussion, which we also had at the Festsaal in March. And in addition, we provide funding for a small scholarship to the final year DA students. And the third axis of cooperation is a mentoring program one of our members has set up and implements together with the DA, where club members volunteer as mentors, and DA students can apply and sign up as mentees, which is another long-standing commitment we want to give back to the DA. Seeing that we have an impressive lineup of panelists with like 3 journalists, International Press Institute, Madame Ribeiro from the OSCE, and former foreign minister from Portugal, and seeing and expecting all of you to have provided challenging questions for the experienced panel. I'd like to finish my comments here and hand back to Brigitta to further introduce our moderator.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to introduce Diana Mautner-Markhof. She will moderate the panel tonight. She is also an alumna of this prestigious Diplomatic Academy, but she also studied at the Vienna University, has a degree in law and an LLM from the University of Chicago Law School, and a BA in computer science from Brown University. She is now the editor-in-chief of iGlobe News, an online news platform that she founded 2020, also in the pandemic, together with some fellow colleagues from her course here at the Diplomatic Academy. Please, Diana.
I'd like to welcome our live and virtual audience to this event. It's being watched on YouTube. I hope we have many listeners and watchers there. Being a member of the Fifth Estate has become a dangerous profession. Since the war in Gaza began, Already 140 journalists have died. iGlobe News has just published an article on this topic today entitled Silencing Truth, Press Freedom Threatened in Gaza Conflict. According to the International Federation of Journalists, Ukraine remains a, quote, dangerous country for journalists, end of quote, with Ukrainian, Russian, and French members of the media dying. According to Reuters, 15 journalists have been killed since the beginning of the war. The latest journalist war victim was Izvestia war correspondent Semyon Iremin, who was killed during an attack by Ukrainian FPV drones in the southeastern region of Zaporizhzhia, where he had gone to film a report on April 19th. The United Nations General Assembly declared May 3rd to be World Freedom Press Day. This day was created to raise awareness of the importance of freedom of the press and remind governments of their duty to respect and uphold the right to freedom of expression enshrined under Article 19 of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also marking the anniversary of the Windhoek Declaration, a statement of free press principles put together by African newspaper journalists in Windhoek, Namibia, in May 1991. Our event today, in honor of World Press Freedom Day, on the topic of challenges for journalists in conflict zones, will discuss the particular challenges journalists face in conflict zones, including the dangers and security risks, denial of access, censorship, harassment, arbitrary detention, and attacks journalists face when reporting from war zones. The importance of press coverage of armed conflicts cannot be overstated. By gathering and disseminating reliable information about armed conflicts, journalists carry out a crucial mission for public interests. It is often thanks to journalists that serious human rights violations, war crimes, and other atrocities are brought to the attention of the public and decision makers. As a reminder, journalists in war zones are protected under international humanitarian law. Direct attacks against journalists constitute a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions and the additional Protocol 1, and are a war crime under the War Statute of the ICC. Here today to discuss our topic are Teresa Ribeiro, Frane Maroevic, Michael Kerbler, Peter Rickwood, and Thomas Seifert. I would like to take a few moments to introduce each of our panelists to you. Teresa Ribeiro is the OSCE representative on freedom of the media. She's from Portugal, where she studied philosophy at the University of Lisbon. Prior to being appointed as the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, she was Secretary of State of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal. She served as president of the National Commission for Human Rights and was also Secretary of State for European Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal. Michael Kerbler worked for the ORF for almost 4 decades. Among other things, he was ORF correspondent in Bonn, Africa, and the Arab world. He served as radio editor-in-chief and head of the ORF foreign radio station. For 10 years, he shaped the Ö1 radio series Im Gespräch with many illustrious guests, from the Dalai Lama to Anton Zeilinger. As a freelance journalist, Kerbler has moderated the Salongespräche of the Wiener Festwochen and the ORF 3 series Zeitgespräch. He is a board member of Reporters Without Borders Austria. This organization is doing invaluable work to protect journalists in Gaza and Ukraine, and also to raise awareness of the dangers journalists in conflict zones face every day. Frane Maroevic has over 30 years of experience in journalism. He started his career at the BBC World Service in London. In post-war Bosnia and Herzegovina, he worked on the reform of public broadcasting, media regulation, and managed donor support for independent media. As the director of the Office of the OSCE Media Freedom Representative, he managed responses to numerous cases of media freedom violations. He is currently the executive director of IPI, the International Press Institute of Vienna. IPI aims to defend media freedom and the free flow of news wherever it is threatened. Peter Rickwood is a journalist who has covered the Troubles in Northern Ireland in the 70s. He joined the IAEA in 2001 as a press officer and subsequently the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, or CTBTO. He founded Atomic Reporters in 2013. Atomic Reporters is an independent, non-profit organization that provides journalists with impartial information about nuclear science and technology to encourage informed reporting. And finally, but not least, Thomas Seifert is the founder of Story Institute, which specializes in multimedia storytelling. He was the deputy editor-in-chief of the Wiener Zeitung and worked for many years for the daily newspapers Die Presse, the magazine News, the magazine Format, and the Viennese city newspaper Falter. In recent years, he has reported on and from war and conflict zones from all over the world, including Ukraine. A warm welcome to all of our panel members. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to now ask each of our panel members to make a brief statement, and we'll start with Ms. Ribeiro, please. The floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity also to present a little bit the mandate, what is it about. And I think it's really important what you said, Ambassador, about this is about international relations. This is about diplomacy. Let's look from this angle to understand a little bit what is media freedom in the context of international relations, in the context of security. And the OSCE, so the representative on freedom of the media, is an autonomous, independent institution of the OSCE. And the OSCE, it's a security organization. And the first question maybe that is interesting is why in a security organization we need to have an independent institution dealing with media freedom. And this is the first question I think is interesting for us to think about. And in this security organization that is the OSCE, with a wide membership, 57 participating states, going from Vancouver to Vladivostok, so it's really wide, with Central Asia, with South Caucasus, a big variety of context, cultural, political, etc. And you know, what is interesting in this organization is a very specific concept, which is the concept of comprehensive security. And in this comprehensive security, you have 3 dimensions. And one of the dimensions is precisely the human dimension. And media freedom is part of the human dimension, which means that media freedom is a key pillar of security. And I think this is very important for us to understand. It's not, so it's about international relations. And when the organization, one of the founding documents of this organization, the Helsinki Final Act, was referring explicitly to the information and to the role of information in building the mutual understanding between the states, that were part of this organization. So, and the situation evolved a lot, and of course now we have a completely different reality. And with technology, but not technology just a tool, but with the change of the situation and at the international level, of course now information is being used for the opposite, not as a tool to promote mutual understanding, but on the contrary, really to promote even more conflict between the participating states of this organization. And of course, technology is helping a lot in this, unfortunately. widespread, very, very long reach, and it goes very quickly. So all these elements combined make information nowadays, and the information a powerful tool. And we need to look at it from this point of view when the information is used or is misused compared to the initial project, compared to the idea of having information to build trust and to build understanding between the participating states. So now we have a completely different reality. And what we have too is we have a clear backsliding of democracy. This is very clear. And if we don't have democracy, it's because we don't have media freedom too. So these two things are very much linked to each other. So we have this, this situation, and if you look at the figures, for example, the report of the Varieties of Democracy Institute that was published in 2022, the situation of freedom of expression, of media freedom globally, it's a very gloomy one. And we have, regarding freedom of expression, we have a situation that is the same that we had in 1984, and regarding democracy, 1989. So where the Cold War was raging in our world. So it's just to, you know, to promote a little bit the debate and to, you know, to question a little bit what is information nowadays, how important is it for democracy, how important this should be also to promote mutual understanding and to promote peace and security. Because in the end, when it's thought within the context of the OSCE, back to the founding documents of the organization, media freedom was really to promote peace and security. So back to basics. This is what we need to fight for, is to have media freedom and to have it precisely to promote an agenda of peace and security, which is not exactly what we are having today. At the same time, I would like also to raise another line for us to think to all together, which is at the national level, we see this clear decline of democracy, and of course of media freedom. And the first signal, it's like you know, the canary in the coal mine. It's a clear sign when media freedom, when democracy is declining. The first sign is, of course, restrictions on media freedom. And so, because we have this situation all across the globe, it's very important that we can preserve the institutions at the international level. It is very important to keep their voices and to keep, you know, their vitality, precisely to keep the important message that media freedom is part of security, and it should be part of an agenda for peace and security. And then I will go back to journalists in conflict, etc. But I wanted, you know, just to leave some elements for us to think about.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ribeiro, for that very interesting statement. I will now turn to you, Michael Kerbler, for your opening statement.
Thank you very much for inviting me here this evening. It's a very important week for us, for Reporter Without Borders. It's switched on, yeah? Well, because on Friday this week, we will publish the new index of press freedom. So everyone is wondering how the picture will be, even what press freedom in Austria means in 2024. Well, journalists in conflict zones. Well, a year ago, on the 3rd of May, on Press Freedoms Day, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres appealed to the state community to protect press freedom and to safeguard journalists. I quote, "Stop targeting truth and truth tellers. As journalists stand up for truth, the world stands with them." Fact is, 1 year later, in every corner of the world, freedom of the press is under attack. Truth is under attack. That's what tonight, in my opinion, as journalist, that's what is all about. And it's really urgent because, as you said, all our freedom depends on press freedom. I'm talking about men and women searching for reliable information on the battlegrounds of our world. In fact, they are searching for truth. There are so many battlegrounds in the Ukraine, in Palestine territories, in Israel, in Sudan, Afghanistan, Chechnya, in Yemen, Iraq, Brazil, and so forth. But as Ambassador Brix said, battlegrounds can be everywhere. So I will mention some. They could be found in Colombia, in Medellin, where since the 1990s a drug war is going on, still going on. Or in Sicily, if you launch an investigation on links between the mafia and political parties, certain political parties. Well-known journalist Paolo Borrometti left the island after he was seriously injured by a group of masked men, and he moved to Rome. There he lived since 2014, and he is permanently 24 hours protected by police. So there is the last 10 years, he said in an interview, there is nothing like private life anymore. Or I will remind you the Maltese investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. She was killed 2017 by a car bomb. Or Jan Kuciak, who worked as reporter for the news website Actuality in Slovakia. He focused mainly on investigating tax fraud of several businessmen with connection to top-level Slovak politicians. Well, one can find as well a battleground in the streets of Moscow, where journalists are in danger if they try an in-depth research about what happened really to Alexei Navalny. 2 journalists were arrested 2 days ago because they did so. They were brought to a district court and accused to be extremists. And we should never forget Anna Politkovskaya. She was killed 2006 in Moscow. To be a journalist is a dangerous and too often a deadly profession. And it is in fact that 9 out of 10 times murder of a journalist is unresolved. According to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, UNESCO Observatory of Killed Journalists, more than 1,600 journalists have been killed between 1993 and 2023. So what do we need in conflict zones? Are safety resources to protect journalists, to mitigate the risks for journalists reporting from the front lines of a conflict. What we do need also is an honest commitment by the community of states to protect journalists we can trust on. The safety of journalists is a fundamental pillar of the universal right to freedom of expression enshrined in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Article 19 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. States, therefore, have a clear duty to protect, to ensure safe working conditions for journalists, but this is, as we know, still often neglected. So my first summary today is as follows. We must act united. Only a comprehensive approach involving media organizations, representatives of civil societies, states and international organizations, as well as journalists and media professionals themselves can effectively improve the safety of journalists. So let us act united. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kerbler. I'll now turn the floor to Frane Maroevic. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And to follow on what the two previous speakers were talked about, I mean, when we talk about conflict, the first victim in any conflict is the truth. And this is why the journalists are usually the first ones to be targeted. This is why journalists are usually the first ones to be attacked, media switched off, threatened with propaganda and so on. You started your presentation with the situation that journalists are facing in Gaza today, and it is absolutely unprecedented. My organization, the IPI, has been monitoring press freedom for 75 years, since 1950. And in our history, we have never seen so many journalists killed in such a short space of time. But this is not just killed journalists, injured journalists, journalists who have lost families, who have lost their homes, who are now living in a situation without food, water, medicines, basic survival. And at the same time, no journalists are allowed to enter this conflict zone, no war zone. Israel has banned any foreign journalists from entering this space and reporting. So what we are relying on those people who are there on the ground with hardly any resources, hardly any food, the equipment being shared, being passed on from somebody who has passed away, who has died, to somebody else who can use it to report and tell us what is going on in there. This is an unprecedented situation. And what we are seeing is, I think, a failure of the international community to act on this particular case when it comes to journalists. Less than a month ago, I was in Geneva at the margins of the Human Rights Council, where we organized an event to talk about these issues, and many people came and spoke and supported, but we still don't see any action being taken to condemn this on an international level, but also to stop this. Stop this killing. This is an appalling situation. You mentioned also, we talked about the situation closer to here, Ukraine, and the killings of journalists there, and it's still an extremely dangerous place for journalists. But maybe just to add that threats to journalists in those kind of conflicts are becoming less physical, but much more about putting pressure, about limiting access to information, about limiting the possibility to report. We've, in the 2 years since the beginning of the war, or the invasion of Ukraine, we have monitored over 1,200 press freedom violations related to the war. And this is mainly by Russia, and quite a lot in Russia, but it is a huge amount of violations, also physical threats, censorship, and other ways to silence, because the toolbox of the oppressors is growing. What was mentioned before by Ms. Ribeiro, technology has been very much enabling, but also technology has become very much used as a way to threaten and to silence media, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. It was also mentioned, I think, other types of conflict by Mr. Brix at the beginning, that what we are seeing is quite often, again, it's forgotten, the situation in Mexico. Mexico is probably one of the deadliest places for journalists today. In recent years, on average, 20 journalists were killed in Mexico in a type of hybrid warfare, hybrid conflict, where criminal gangs are controlling the security situation and essentially are killing journalists with impunity. So that's a different type of conflict that we are also seeing today, where journalists are absolutely threatened. And it's maybe interesting to make the connection, because this year, the World Press Freedom Day, the focus is about environmental journalism and climate. And what we have noticed that in Mexico, many of those who were reported on what could be seen as climate stories, illegal deforestation, illegal logging, illegal construction, those are the type of journalists that are being also attacked and killed. So I think to round off the point about the conflict, what we need to do is see more action by states, because states are the ones that have the tools and the power to act. It was mentioned that in 9 out of 10 cases, there is impunity for attacks and killings of journalists. Who has the power to investigate these killings? Who has the police, the resources to do that? States do that. And this is, I think, a complete failure by the states to do this. And it's a complete failure by the states to do this when it comes to enforcing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we talked about, the Geneva Conventions, where journalists are specifically treated as civilians, and attacks and killings of journalists in war zones could constitute a war crime. And this is something that is absolutely, we need more pressure on states to do this and to act.
Thank you very much for this very important statement. I'd like now to turn the floor over to Peter Rickwood. The floor is yours.
I want to thank the organizers of this event and the presence of so many people who obviously have some belief in the power of the press and the need of the press. I want to take a different tack tonight. I'm going to talk about a larger conflict zone, but it's no less important for journalists to be engaged with it. I've just come from a conference for 2 days in the Hofburg, which was addressing what euphemistically are called killer robots. Killer robots is the easily understandable term of the impact of artificial intelligence, automation on the battlefield. And the point I'm trying to make with this is that it's a challenging subject. Journalists do need to inform their readers about what's happening, but in many cases, journalists, because if you're a journalist, you're in a hamster wheel and you're running after your tail to catch up, don't have the time to fully understand the complexity of the situation. Now, we've mentioned the Geneva Convention, and we are, as I said, in this conflict zone 35 years after the end of the Cold War, or it's more or less that gap. Complacent, indifferent, not particularly well informed about where we are today. We are in a dangerous situation, and we don't seem to have the tools or the know-how to address it. What should we be doing? People don't know. This was what I hear too often, that there's a concern, and then people say, well, I don't want to read about it, I'm fed up with bad news. You know, I'm going to go get my news from TikTok or whatever. The fact is that the press, the media, the news industry, the journalism industry, the one I used to make my living from, is in terrible state. I look back on my history, and really more than half the newspapers I worked for have gone, they've folded. People don't get the information that they used to have. Having said that, there is a future for journalism. There is a need for journalism. There is a need for journalism right now to tell you what's going on and what the options are that you could consider taking. What are you going to do? You're going to sit on a log and wait for the frogs to eat you, or whatever the expression is. So I see certainly in Diana's iGlobe News, the future of journalism. It's going to be smaller, it's going to be more targeted, and it's going to require, as journalism does, the support of the audiences, because if I'm a journalist, I'm not going to work unless I'm paid. How am I going to get paid? Well, I'm going to get paid by being employed by a news organization. How is that news organization going to get money? It has to have an audience and have some remuneration from that audience. This is really important. This is about the future of journalism. This is about the future that possibly you all can have a hand in helping support. Just going back to the technical, wonderful world that we now live in, and this is the theme of the organization that I support, Atomic Reporters. Journalists don't understand the complexities because they don't have time, or because they're assigned to a story ill-equipped. I used to be an environment reporter, and I had the luxury of working with scientists who could explain the difference between a teratogen and a mutagen, for example, toxics in fresh water. There has to be, as well as the steps I'm urging everyone to take to support journalism, there also has to be support of journalists to enable them to understand the complexities out there. We are at a point where we've forgotten about the Geneva Convention, we've forgotten about the post-Cold War solutions, or for want of a better term. They've to an extent been lost. Now we have to look at new treaties. We have complex technologies we didn't have 35 years ago. Do they endanger us? Probably yes. Do they require agreement on avoiding those dangers? Yes. But that's the task for the journalist, to explain these issues, to try to build a consensus based on information. And so I'll wrap up, but it just seems to me that the role of the journalist at a time when journalism is really in danger is as important, more important than it's ever been. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very important statement, also on the evolving role of the journalist, which of course affects our organization as well. I'd like to turn the floor now over to Mr. Thomas Seifert. The floor is yours.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much. Yes, I actually want to build on what my colleague just said and change a little bit what I wanted to say and what I'm going to say. And what is this here that I have in my hand? What is it? Any guess? Surveillance device. What is it? A mobile phone, somebody said. Yes, so that's pretty obvious. We know that by now. Yes, it's my iPhone 15, my beloved, hated mobile phone. This is a weapon of mass disruption. Mass disruption. It disrupts public discourse. Any of you think that a guy like Donald Trump could be president of the United States and is now even a candidate of the presidency of the United States without Twitter, or without the 1 minute soundbite, the 30-second soundbite, in an environment where he has to explain his policies, his tax plans, the complexities of political life, of society, etc.? My answer to that is no. I mean, you cannot be president in an environment or candidate in an environment where you have to argue, where you have to know the facts and all the rest of it, but you don't, because here it is, the weapon of mass disruption is right here. I'm not saying it's only a force for bad, No, I told you before, it's my love-hate relationship with this thing here. Because, of course, information is out there. I mean, Google Translate is the best thing that ever happened. ChatGPT 4 is perfect. If you don't have it, it's worth the $20 a month to pay for it. It's fantastic. I love it. But at the same time, we have to agree that definitely the agora, the public space, has vanished. Even it goes as far as what Putnam wrote back, I think it was in the 70s, bowling alone. It's even more lonely out there because people are here and not, maybe we are here now physically meeting each other, talking to each other, but it's happening less and less. And we have it also with the students. Now what happened in Colombia and other places, part of it is really also polarization in student life because also everything is happening online. But also the disruption, as you also said, happened in my trade as well, because before there was a crisis, let's say Ukraine, or no, let's go back to Chechnya, 99, this war. Before this thing was there, I had a huge satellite phone with me. I was in Chechnya, I beamed home stuff. I reported on it to the best of my knowledge. As you all know, this is the first draft of history, and it's not perfect, but we all tried to bring home what we thought was the best available version of the truth back then. Today, I mean, the Gaza war, it's all televised. I mean, Ukraine, I don't know how many people I've been blown up, seen being blown up on YouTube with the first-person view drones. This stuff is out there. If you want to see people getting killed in the trench, no problem. You just put the search button, and you can see people basically shot up in real time in some trench in eastern Ukraine, in southern Ukraine. God knows where. It's really, yeah. And this Swiss Army knife of the information age has made this all even more accessible. So basically what happened that people think they don't need people like me anymore. Governments are really happy because, again, going back to my Donald Trump, do you think he wants journalists to ask questions? Do you think that any autocrat wants a journalist to interpret what's happening, to give his or her analysis of what's happening? Of course not. Why would they? They want their story out. I mean, you just need to listen to any of the numerous and getting more and more numerous populists out there who, with the whole blah blah, go out there and to tell their stories. If anybody would ask them, I mean, for instance, even discourse is not possible with some of them. I'm getting a little bit enraged when I think about all these things. So we have this changing landscape. You spoke about the democracies under threat. Yes, of course, because if the infrastructure of democracy is getting a hit, meaning the media, of course democracy cannot function without the media, because how can a non-informed or the over-newsed and under-informed public take decisions of should we raise the taxes or not, what to do about migration, and can they have an informed discourse? No, they can't. If they don't have media, if there is no platform to have this kind of informed discourse. So my thesis is the crisis of democracy goes hand in hand with the crisis of democratic capitalism, and that goes hand in hand with the crisis of the media. And then we can ask ourselves what was first, the hen or the egg, but it doesn't matter. I mean, we are in trouble, and I think we all feel it, and we all know it, and it has been said before. Then I want to take the opportunity, and I think I'm not a vain person, but I want to talk about us, my tribe, my people, journalists. Because we've heard so many of us have been killed, have been maimed. I myself have been in numerous places where I should not have been, where we've been shot at, where we have been just, my friend and colleague dragged somebody down from the, 15th floor, 11th floor from the Palestine Hotel on April 8th. He has been shot up with from an American tank. We never got the answers that we were looking for. I saw many other things that I wish I'd never seen before. And even those who come back home, they have scars, right? Even myself, I might have scars. I'm not a heavy drinker. I'm a happy person, but who knows? PTSD can come up later in life, maybe tomorrow. So I think we all have these scars. And I also ask you to think about that as well. An Irish guy he wrote a book. His name is Keen. He was in, I think, even worse places. Rwanda, I think, really broke him. Read his book, The Madness, where he explains why, as a journalist, you want to go back to danger, why you would actually do that. I mean, why would I go back to Ukraine? I've been there many times before. I know how it looks like. I know how the sirens. I know when there's a grenade coming in, when one is going out. I know the difference. But why on earth would I go back there? It's crazy. It's, as Mr. Keen wrote in his book eloquently, it's the madness. Everybody of us has an excuse. My excuse is I'm interested in history. I mean, I studied biology, but nevertheless, and I finished biology, but sitting front row of when history happens in this short period of time we have on this planet is really nice. It's really interesting. So that is my excuse. And every journalist, you ask them, we all have our excuses. We spoke about PTSD. That is something that I think a lot of people, a lot of colleagues are waking up to the fact that this is happening. We all also understand now that the people who are even more under threat sometimes than we are the local producers, the translators, etc. We saw that in Afghanistan, so we should think about them too. Because in Ukraine, I have two field producers that are working with me. I see their Instagram feed all the time. They are constantly on the front line. When I'm gone, they have another colleague. And my last point is moral injury. So even if you're not threatened with PTSD, what also can happen is a moral injury means you're witnessing something really horrible, an execution, a crime, and you can't do nothing about it. And this is also something that can cause psychological distress later on in life. So I'm asking you also to think about this issue as well, which is not life-threatening, but still pretty bad.
Thank you very much for your statement. We'll now start the rounds of discussion. I'll start it by asking some questions from the panel, so to speak, and then afterwards we'll turn, of course, the audience. We'll include the audience, and we hope you'll have many questions. There were so many interesting presentations here, and I know that all of you must have many, many questions. I'll start with asking Ms. Ribeiro a question. In a 2022 interview you stated, and today you mentioned it again, there is no security without media freedom. And under your leadership, the OSCE has developed a toolbox to protect journalists. The Safety of Journalists Toolbox, the Guidelines for Monitoring Online Violence Against Female Journalists, and the Safe Resource Hub, which uses AI and other technologies to safeguard media freedom. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about that and how this can be used to protect journalists in conflict zones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. I think it's working. Yes, thank you very much, and also thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to show a little bit what we are doing regarding the specific topic of protection of journalists. I think it's also important to distinguish the different levels and what can we do at the different levels. At the national level, what is the responsibility of the states? At the international level, and at the international level, which is the case of the representative on freedom of the media, definitely the mandate is, of course, about keeping the values, keeping the principles, keeping the commitments high in the agenda, and at the same time to remind the states that they have adhere voluntarily to some commitments, to some obligations, and they have to respect them. And at the same time, it's also up to international organizations like mine to provide the assistance the states need to align their regulations, their practices with the commitments they adhere to. And this is very important at the international level. And this precisely to respond to this kind of demands that we have launched. The institution in 2018 presented a ministerial council decision that was adopted at this level of all the ministers of the 57 participating states, regarding the protection of journalists. And this was really important because it was 6 years ago. And then, of course, after that, 1.5 years ago, we decided that it was time to take stock what has been done, what is the situation in the participating states, and again, let's not only identify the gaps, but also provide the tools to the participating states for them to ensure the protection of journalists. This is how this toolbox of journalists was born. It was launched very recently. What is interesting about this toolbox is that it's a joint work between national focal points and the organization. But it's very much this networking of professionals, of representatives of the participating states. It's up to the participating states to decide who they want to participate in this networking. But this, for me, is the most important asset of the entire project. It's a live networking with all these representatives exchanging information, trying to identify the gaps, trying to identify best practices, and our experience regarding the implementation of the toolbox, it's so far quite positive. The enthusiasm is there, and I hope that it can really contribute to improve the situation of the journalists. But of course, if the states don't care, it will be, a very difficult task to be completed. But in any case, I think this also raises awareness among this vast network of professionals, and this is also important, and this is also a tool for them to push for an improvement in the situation of the journalists at the national level. At the same time, and because women women journalists are suffering, I would say, a double burden because they are women and they are journalists, we have also a project specifically targeting women journalists and to protect them for the constant online harassment, which unfortunately in many cases turn into offline violence. So we know that it's happening in 20% of the cases of online harassment. It turns into real violence. It means that there is nothing virtual about online attacks against women journalists, and this is also important. And to complete a little bit, or to go a bit further regarding the protection of women journalists, we published recently monitoring guidelines for women journalists, and it's a kind of it's an important tool, really, that allows us to identify the cases of online harassment, online attacks, and of course the ultimate goal is to prevent the escalation of these attacks. And for that we need to mobilize a set of different stakeholders, police, etc., judiciary, the governments and others. But I would say this is what we have regarding the protection of journalists.
Thank you very much for this very interesting and important answer, which shows also the multilateral aspect of what those organizations can do to protect journalists. I would like to ask Mr. Kerbler also a question. I saw on the Reporters Without Borders Austria website that there was an opening of a center of Reporters Without Borders in Beirut to help protect journalists who report from Gaza by providing aid, equipment, and security. You already had opened 2 other such centers in Ukraine, and I wanted you maybe to share with us how this has helped protect journalists in conflict zones and what these centers actually do.
Yeah, this is a very important thing we created in cooperation, for example, in Gaza with the Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism. Because you mentioned women, we created tents, or we delivered tents for women. We protected this area, and they were on secret places, so they were quite in a safe situation. That is one thing. We feel that it's our duty. Because we had to support them with medicine, with doctors. Journalists are wounded. Journalists need, in the battlefields, they need psychologists or people who take care about the trauma they just had faced. So it's not only the question of protect them by bulletproof vests. This is one very important thing, but the other thing is to take care, to look for them, that they have enough food, for example, and someone you can speak with. You're not alone. We try to support them with SIM cards, because when they lost their smartphones, of course they want phone their home or their women, their relatives, whatever. I'm still alive. This is something where we feel that is really a thing we can do. And you mentioned the Ukraine. Yeah, we had 2 media centers where all the stuff you need from accus, lithium batteries, etc., to provide them with hardware so that they can do their job.
Yes.
And give the information to the public, deliver their stories to the broadcast wherever they are coming from.
Yes, that's such important work that you're doing, and I'm so grateful to Reporters Without Borders that you're doing that, and I very much support everything that you do. I'd like to come to you now. You had a very passionate statement, which really touched me, saying that, of course, they're picking up the cameras from their killed colleagues and continuing the work. But you also mentioned that what one needs today to work is access to communication, which means the internet. And in Ukraine, there was the Starlink provided by Elon Musk. But in Gaza, that's always an issue. What do you think we can do to provide the internet so that the stories can keep coming out of Gaza, for instance?
I mean, I think it's a part of the bigger question in terms of how do you bring in equipment in a situation like that, and journalists are still able to use the local mobile networks, as Mr. Kerbler said. By providing them SIM cards, you're actually providing them with a possibility to report, because today, as Mr. Seifert said, the phone becomes your main tool, and what we have heard on the ground is that today what they need most is mobile telecommunications and equipment. So technology, like you mentioned, Starlink, is amazing, it's good, it's fantastic, it can be helpful, but this is also in the hands of one man, because what we saw, for example, in Ukraine is when Mr. Musk decided that this was politically no longer appropriate or interesting for him, he decided he can switch it off. He can turn it on and off as he wishes. So I think what we need to look at the issue of how we regulate internet and internet access. And there has been a discussion in the international fora for quite a while, where the access to internet should also be seen as part of, let's say, our basic rights, like access to other necessities, because internet has become such a important tool to do our jobs, to do our daily things. I mean, we all know without telephone today you cannot do even basic information or banking and so on. So there is the discussion whether to have it as a part of our rights or not, I think is an important, but for journalists today, access to the internet is absolutely indispensable in terms of producing your stories, but also connecting with the audiences. There is no other way to do it today.
Absolutely. And we often would even not know what's going on if we didn't get these stories, which are being broadcast through the internet itself.
Sure, but it also creates the issue and the problem that today it's so easy to produce something that looks like good quality news content, that you don't know whether this is produced by a journalist organization, whether this is produced by a propaganda machine or by somebody else. So it becomes very difficult to know what is a product of independent journalism, and this is why reputation becomes so important today in journalism. The brands of journalism are under attack and under threat, but I also see the opportunities in brands because that's what we trust. We look at websites, and we saw that at the beginning of the health COVID crisis, people did turn to the traditional media, to the reliable media to find out the health information. I mean, many people went in many different ways, as we know, but there was definitely a strong peak of people looking for reliable information and looking for journalism. So coming back to the point of, Peters and Mr. Seifert, journalism will survive in a different form, and we do need journalism today more than ever.
And I'd like to pass the question on to Mr. Rickwood and Mr. Seifert regarding misinformation. I mean, that is a big topic as well. You also mentioned it. How can the user of information, the consumer of information, discern if what he's seeing, what he's reading, is actual information, or if something is being manipulated? Is there any way to safeguard against that?
Hui. Atomic Reporters had its roots in the Iraq War in 2003. And I was a journalist working, I was a press officer working in the IAEA at the time. And the Iraq War has had an extraordinarily profound effect on everything that we're dealing with now. But what was so horrendous for me was to see the stupidity and the callous indifference of the journalists who were covering the file. I'm sorry. So back to you about, how can you determine misinformation? The information was being fed by the government, by the United States government, to journalists who were probably too busy, or in many, many cases didn't understand the claims that were being made, so they couldn't challenge them. That is why we put our emphasis on this little organization I run on equipping journalists to go out there with the knowledge to say, wait a second, is this really true that you're telling me this is plutonium and it's not low enriched uranium or whatever? You understand what I'm saying? So I don't have a pat, easy answer to how you address the issues of disinformation, misinformation. Don't trust your government, I'll tell you that. Don't trust commerce, but anyway, I'm gonna, before I get overheated, I'll cut that line of inquiry off. But there are fortunately a number of sites out there that will offer you assistance, knowledge, and the other basic point is that you have to be informed yourself, so that you're not the dummy saying, oh, I didn't know that Donald Trump is going to save the world from global warming. Question policy, question claims. I mean, misinformation is, you know, there's a sore thumb there somewhere. Just follow your instincts. And also, as I said, the many sites, the many journalists out there who are, you know, sifting through the claims that are made and responding.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Seifert, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, as also Mr. Maroevic said, maybe this is a renaissance for journalism, because even today you can't even trust the pictures. You know, like if I'm sitting down maybe for 10 minutes with some on the computer and I have access to an AI platform, I can basically fabricate a video of you which looks really nice and looks really real, where you say outrageous things. And nobody knows where it's coming from. Only when it comes from a strange Twitter feed, or when the New York Times would publish it, it would be different. So I think it's true that brands play a more important role, I think. Credibility plays a more important role. Also, what's good about the technology is also to debunk disinformation is become much easier today, because there is websites out there. For instance, I don't know, there is maybe, let's say, a bomb attack, something like that, at 12:45 in a certain city, and then you just put in where it is, geolocated, what the weather is, etc., etc. Everything would be there, and where the sun is on this day in the year. So it's also, that helps a lot with journalists finding out what misinformation is and where it's coming from. So I think, journalists can do that. But still, I think the most important thing is boots on the ground. And I forgot to mention before, shame on me, local journalists, of course, are the first line there, and they are under the biggest threat because people like myself have an Austrian passport. If Ukraine is too hard for me, I just hop on the next train, come back to Vienna, and I'm here. But people live in the war. In Gaza, it's even worse than in Ukraine for now, and so on. And that is one thing. And the other is, what has been lost is, when I was young journalist, I could report from both sides. Even in Chechnya, I could go with the Maskadov rebels, with the nationalists. They warned me, okay, these bearded guys are very very dangerous, to keep away from them. Mm-hmm. And then later I was invited by the sports attaché in Vienna from the Russian embassy to sit down for tea. And I told them, listen, it's very easy. You just, if you think this is wrong, what I write, send me back with I'm willing to embed with your troops. That's what I did. And today, since I would say Syria, very difficult, because it's you are a spy. You are, they will not give you the visas, not give you the permissions. So I think the work has been very difficult for journalists to really make up their own mind what these guys say, what that guys say, and then usually our task is to make up our minds and see, okay, this is kind of maybe is closest to the truth that we can get. But unfortunately, it's less and less available, because you cannot work on both sides anymore. So, of course, you have a colleague there, mm-hmm. You have a colleague here. With big media organization, it works, the BBC and others. But I think it's a big problem for many smaller news organizations. You have basically just a few reporters out there who need to cover wherever the hotspot is at the moment.
That's a very good point, that the things that were possible in the past are no longer able to be done. I wanted to now open the floor up to our audience. I hope there are many questions, and I'm very excited to hear them. Yes, please? There's coming. Thank you very much. Maybe start by introducing yourself.
Yeah, I'm here from a private occasion. Agnes Bogajska-Schroeter. I was born in Poland and came to Austria. So when I was a child, I knew how it is to live in a non-democratic country. Thank you very much for all you do and all your work and passion. Being a mother of an 18-year-old student, it sounds trivial, but I think we need to go back the path, starting with our young children and young people. And I am really scared about the media, not knowledge of media. Young people do not read newspapers and so on. I think it's really bad to complain about young people because there are a lot of wonderful exceptions. But could you comment on preventions and strategies how to support you and support democracy? What can we do early on? Thank you so much.
Would anyone like to take that? And please, maybe the question's more related to our topic of discussion, but we will answer that question. Would anyone like to take that? Please.
Happy to try and take that, because also as a father of 2 teenagers, I'm sort of looking at the same way and thinking about the issues of media literacy and how children and how we all understand and manage media today. And maybe it was interesting to me that you mentioned that you are from Poland. I was born in what was then Yugoslavia, and also coming from a country that had no free press. One thing that I felt we learned was reading between the lines. You never trusted what you read. So I kind of came to this profession with built-in skepticism of everything that I read, which I found kind of helpful as along the way. So maybe we should also learn a little bit more about critical analysis and critical thinking, and it's an important issue. But this issue quite often gets thrown as a media problem, and I would just like to throw it back because it's a societal problem. And we need to deal with this through education, which is an important element, understanding of how to consume media and how to read what we are seeing, and also through a societal dialogue, because a lot of these problems, journalists are suffering from these problems, but they are not the cause and they are not the solution. They can be part of the solution, but I think we need to see it in a much broader sense.
But may I just chip in, because what you said, we can be part of the solution, and going back to your question, I was at the International Journalism Festival in Perugia recently, and what was that, of course there's the panels, and as you know, later on in the bar, and in the restaurant over pizza, things continue, and it was really nice because we had some young colleagues on our table, and we were talking about solution journalism, constructive journalism, what they call it, whatever you want, impact journalism, and I think that's what we heard from a lot of our young colleagues, and I think the audience is the same. They say, okay, we know that climate change is here, we know the wars, we know the injustice, we know all this, but what to do? And I think that is one thing where we as journalists maybe have to rethink our approach, that it's not enough, obviously, today to, especially for young people, to say, listen, the world is bad, this is what's happening, deal with it, but give them some hope, give them, maybe heroes. Like, I mean, in my generation, we had Mandela, right? We had heroes. Where are they? They are here, but we have to find them. We have to, we have to put out there, we have to shine the light on them and say, listen, we have heroes as well. And it's not only the Nobel Peace Prize or something, And so I think maybe that's, I take your question and also what you say, I think it's on us as well. We have to also try, to reconnect with our audiences, and also just with especially the world is a bleak place at the moment. Yeah, there is always hope. I mean, especially in the war, we know that, in the worst places, that's where people sometimes laugh. That's where people sometimes are more optimistic than in Vienna, where everything is perfect.
Thank you very much. I think you wanted to add something.
I want to add one fact. I was in charge for the shortwave service of Austrian radio, which was closed down 2003 from the government of Mr. Schüssel. And the other day I met someone from Russia, and he told me, I'm listening to shortwave service from Germany. And he told me that there was a group of ordinary people who made crowdfunding, and they rent the station, the broadcast, I think 2 or 3 times a week. Russian speaking people, information broadcasting to Russia. And I feel it's like in the Cold War, because it was black heaven. The only thing you reached the USSR was by shortwave service. And we are back again, and there is in every radio in Russia, you have shortwave receiver. So we, Reporters Without Borders, we are broadcasting from the satellite, 27 programs now in Russian language, so that, you know, if Mr. Musk is turning off the switch. So there are other ways to inform people who need information to know what's going on in their world. So you can do something, even if you think, I'm not a hero. They did it by crowdfunding.
Can I just add something about Poland? Because by chance I have written here, a poll recently in Poland found that 63% of the people polled, and I don't have the numbers and I don't have the source in front of me, supported the notion that countries where governments interfere with press freedom should be punished. Now, that I think is telling, but just one other quick point. As journalists, and I'll speak for myself, we were arrogant, we were stupid, we didn't listen to our audiences, and now we have to. Okay, we thought we knew best. We thought that if we had too much engagement with our audiences, the audiences would you know, interfere with our hallowed work. Thank God that's over. So now we want to know what you want, and just before I, you know, take a deep breath, what people want is to know more information about issues like nuclear weapons, which is our bread and butter, and also the issues that I began talking about earlier, which of course the robotics, artificial intelligence, the complexities that almost require a new language to express, to help people understand them.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, our next question. Oh, did you want?
Okay. No, it's okay. I will. I will.
I thought we'd taken a few more questions, maybe.
No, it's
Grauenberg Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe. It's fantastic to hear about the shortwave, because there's an avalanche of fake news coming and troll fabrics, etc. Then you have social media with a lot of fake news. I wonder how the situation is, because a number of newspapers, serious newspapers, they have less and less correspondence they can't afford. It's a financing problem, and probably the character on the site, for instance, war zone in Ukraine or wherever, the character has changed. There are less correspondents, there are more freelancers, more local journalists, and how can they cooperate? Is that smoothly, more or less? Because you have also to double check news. So how do you see the situation for the development of journalism, a reliable one? Thank you.
Maybe we'll take one more question. That was the lady. Yes. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Elisabeth Bauer, and I'm a journalist here in Vienna writing about emotions in war reporting. And I was very interested in your take, Mr. Seifert, what you said about that journalists on site should be trusted. Because, in fact, there is a study by Johanna who said that actually people or reporters who are from the war zones are trusted less nowadays, that they are trusted less by international media outlets. So I would be interested what your take is on that.
Did you want to take any of these questions?
Yes, I can, and I will be very, of course. First of all, I would like to thank the question, because it triggers responses, which I think is important. Let's factor a little bit the problem and try also to look at what can we do. This is also very important, and you mentioned this very interesting initiative, and we have initiatives at all levels, and this is what, as it should be. And it's not us and others that will find the solutions. This is a joint effort, and it's we collectively have to contribute to find the right solutions. Society is very complex nowadays, as we know. It's not a problem of journalists, it's a problem of society. I fully agree with what Frane said about this. It's really much more complex, and that's the reason why it's difficult to find the right responses to the problems we have to deal and to tackle right now. Definitely, media literacy is a fantastic tool, and it should be, of course, expanded. Another issue that it's important, it's not only just media literacy, but media freedom literacy, which means that to promote the value of information that contributes to public debate in a democratic society, and it's very much linked to journalism. So this is also very important, a kind of subset issue within the broader context of media literacy. It's really why should we value information that is produced by journalists? Why this is important? And this is something that we have to learn too. At the same time, international organizations have the obligation, as I said before, really to keep the priorities, keep the values high in their political agenda, and this is very important, especially when at the national level democracy is declining, is backsliding. Of course, the governments, they have positive obligations to protect human rights and to protect freedom of expression, which, by the way, is an enabler of the enjoyment of other human rights. If we don't have information, if we don't have proper information, we will be, in a way, diminished in our enjoyment of other human rights. So, again, there are many levels in which, and at the same time, how can we mobilize civil society and academia to have projects and to really invest in journalism and in media literacy, in media freedom literacy, in democracy, and try to understand how can we navigate in this very complex society. So there is a lot to be done, and it's not just a monster we cannot deal with. We can and we should. It's our responsibility as individuals, as citizens, to really, mobilize ourselves also for that.
Thank you very much. Would any of the other gentlemen like to take on one of the questions?
Yes, I think a very important question that you asked. And local journalists, of course, if your country is under bombardment, is in a war, things feel suddenly more personal. But also, I think we should not forget that just not so long ago, the Ukrainska Pravda, I think, and the Kiev Independent, they went after, corrupt people close to the government and in the secret service, actually, in the military intelligence and the intelligence service. So, and by the way, women journalists, they are brave. So it's really, I'm really sometimes it's amazing what local journalists can do. But of course, sometimes, and I have also the experience when I was near the front line with a Ukrainian journalist, that of course it's very difficult when people shoot at you to be this, kind of neutral observer of whatever happens. But still, I think you're very professional, and there's different roles for different people. Like for me, for instance, I'm not an expert on Ukraine or Iraq or Afghanistan or any other place that I have worked in, but I think I know a little bit about all these places. So this is a generalist approach, and you need that as well, because I see certain patterns maybe in the run-up to a conflict, how a conflict develops, certain patterns in a conflict that others don't see, because I have more experience. This is like, I don't know how many conflicts I've been in. And then, of course, the local people know much more about the history of the place, about the power dynamics, about all other things that are important. And then when you say about trust, I think maybe you think about Gaza, where some of colleagues from Gaza have been accused that they would be like one-sided or some propagandists or something. Well, if a bomb lands on my home, if I'm a refugee in this place, yes, I mean, things certainly, it's very difficult for me sometimes to be like a BBC reporter standing there and reporting as if I'm, reporting from some football game in Vienna. I fully understand that. But I think people are really trying to do their best, and there's different roles, I think, for different people. That's it.
Thank you very much. That's a very telling statement. Would anyone else like to answer any of the questions that were asked?
Oh, I was just going to point out that the local reporter is truly so important. And you have to understand that any reporter, if any reporter doing her or his work properly, has to develop trust with the people they're working with. And so however you want to cut it, this is something that in a war zone you have to survive. Obviously, you have to try to survive as a journalist. But it's also the basic tool of the trade is getting people to talk frankly to you and share information. So I don't think the fact that there are more freelancers working now is an issue. It's still the basic, sort of steps that have to be taken. So that's all I can say.
This goes to what you mentioned before with the rise of grassroots journalism, because you mentioned that in your opening statement, grassroots journalism coming up, and the plurality of media voices, which is now the media landscape we find ourselves in.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can publish on the internet. You don't have to have the linotype machines and the whatever they were, the clitographs and the press hall. So there is flexibility. There are possibilities that didn't exist, despite the burden that IT puts on us in other ways. And I think you're seeing. You mentioned solutions journalism. You're seeing with no question there's news avoidance, which I'd mentioned earlier. The people say, I don't want to know what's going on out there. It's too much for me. But if you give people tools, and this is what quote solutions journalism or impact journalism has got many names. Then there's a possibility for the audience to respond and to feel empowered, which is important. It doesn't mean that everything has to be polarized or agenda driven, but what do you do in terms of dealing with new technologies that threaten peace and security? You look at new treaties. You look at new means of agreement that are going to do what the old treaties that we've stupidly taken apart, most of them, were capable of providing that security. So I think this is a great opportunity for the sort of focused media to actually be even more quite constructive in terms of how we get out of this mess we've got ourselves in at the moment, because it's not going to happen if there aren't steps to prevent excess. And we know AI is a huge issue. It's a cellular creature. It's not just programmed. It's sitting there ticking away. What do we want to do in terms of AI and defense, in terms of weaponization, in terms of use on the battlefield? Well, time for a treaty. So that's where a small media can address the issues and invite response.
Thank you for that. Are there any more questions in our audience? Please.
Herr Schreiber-Huber, I'm a journalist in foreign politics, and in former years I also traveled to many conflict areas, especially in the Middle East, Iran, Afghanistan. Times were different. Yeah? We traveled, whether it was in delegations or it was on our own account, without being protected by anybody. But we were on the spot and we experienced something and we saw something, we heard something, and we talked to people in the areas. Now things have changed so much. Technology is the main one of the main factors of reporting nowadays. And the journalists, on the one hand, the media have no money to send them to conflict areas. On the other hand, the journalists can't travel to these countries because of the conflict countries won't let them in. And what remains are sources and channels that are not always reliable. In many cases, they aren't. People get informed by the social media and they can't check whether these are fake news or whether these news correspond to reality because the sources are not checked. And my poor colleagues who are here working in home offices about certain subjects, very often they have never seen these countries from inside. So the media have also in the public reputation have deteriorated a lot. But on the one hand, so I mean the reputation, the prestige has deteriorated. But on the other hand, there is no confidence in the international organizations. I remember at that time I often went to OSCE offices in difficult countries and they were very helpful. Now in many countries these offices don't exist anymore. And when I was in Iraq last time, which was just before the COVID crisis, people don't rely on the UN either because they say this is just a war of representatives, so everybody is frustrated. What can be done?
So your question is?
My question is what can be done about that for the media and for the and for the international organizations? What can they do to improve their reputation?
Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone like to take that question? Please.
To answer your question very directly, I think we've touched upon it here. There is a changing dynamic in terms of journalism, how journalism works, and journalism's relationship with its audience, and that's now in a constant flux. And one of the things that I see as an optimistic moment is that there is, as I mentioned earlier, there is a need for a rebuilding of trust between journalists and their audience, and vice versa, so that people will go to people who they trust. They will develop trust over time. It will take some time. The difficulty that you mentioned in terms of journalists being able to report and go to war zones, I mean, Thomas was talking about, even in Ukraine, you can't go to an actual war zone. There are restrictions. Gaza, you cannot enter. In Syria, it was absolutely craziness. But on the other hand, what we have seen is development of open source intelligence. Bellingcat, very well-known journalism outfit, was developed by people who actually never left their computers, and they realized that, I think Thomas was talking about it, you could sit at home and understand, okay, this is a true picture because on that day the sun was falling here and I found a satellite picture where that, I don't know, tree is like that and so on, and you can rebuild the stories. And what I've seen, which is very encouraging, is media like New York Times are now investing so much more into showing the audience how they work. It's also about exposing your process to the audience as a way to rebuild trust, to show them, okay, so this is how we put this story together. So if you don't trust us, you can see all the bits yourself and see if you can do it better. So journalism is, I'm optimistic, journalism is going to survive because we will always need people to tell us what's going on around the world. We will always need storytellers, and we will find ways of doing this. Now it's difficult, now it's complicated, it's messy, finances are in dire need. We will need to find solution, and I think that's probably the most urgent thing, is how do we find money to pay for public interest investigative journalism today? That's probably the most difficult, so that the journalists have a place to work, that they can earn a living from their profession. That would be from my point.
Thank you very much. I think now we're going to, okay, this will be our last question, and then we'll do our final summaries, please.
Yeah, so my name is Sharon. I'm a student here at the Academy, also with a background in journalism. So my question is, from the gentleman on the far. I don't know what that is, but he's the gentleman at the end. He talked about the fact that the state has the capacity and the power to protect journalists. So my question is, since time in beginning, I mean, when I started learning journalism, we learned that, especially from where I come from, like the government in itself has like the biggest shares in the media. So majority of the media outlets are owned by people in politics. So there is with politicians and governments, there is a conflict of interest when it comes to truth. So, and the journalist is supposed to be reporting on the truth. So my question is, how do we get states to be able to protect people who they see as a threat to the government? Yeah, and I would also like to think of it this way, that the last time there was a film that was shown here at the university, and I think most of you have already watched it. The 20 Days in Mariupol. There was this journalist, he filmed what was happening on ground, but when it came out, Russia came out and said that it's fake news. Yeah. So my question, another question would come, people are talking about the fact that social media is not credible, and mainstream media is more credible because there's fact-checking, and I mean, it's like an organization that is trusted and all that. Where do we draw the line? Because I feel like social media is just like a place for people. It's like a platform for people to share information, but not an information source. Where do you draw the line between mainstream media being credible and social media not being credible, when we know that there's also impartiality, and there was also impartiality and agenda setting of the media that also could have created misinformation and disinformation without the masses knowing. I just feel like people, it's just like it has changed hands, and the fact that now it's in people's hands, then we don't know who is doing it, then there's a lot of questions. But what was it when it was in hands that we also didn't trust, or we didn't know, that are telling us what? Yeah, thank you.
That's a very good question. Mainstream media and the prejudice
I want just one remark on that, because I think it really starts with the ethics of the journalists themselves. So hopefully people are choosing this job not for the money. This would be a very stupid idea, by the way, but because they have a certain ethics. And for instance, they were journalists, Radio Mille Collines, people who follow the genocide in Rwanda, they were actively encouraging people to go out and kill the cockroaches, as it was said there, to go for the Tutsis in Rwanda back then in the 90s. And you have, of course, Nazi newspapers that where horrible things were being written in this city back in the 30s and 40s. So I think it starts with your own heart and your own mind. And of course, your owner might not always be the friend of the truth. And it means that also you have to stand up to the owner. That means you have to be unionized. You have to, and then also the good thing is, I think, as we said, I mean, it was actually a guy from Vienna, Mr. Schumpeter, who talked about creative destruction. And maybe there is some creativity in the destruction of the media landscape, because suddenly I see a lot of energy, especially with young colleagues, with young journalists who go out there and say, let's do this, because you don't have to have a printing press, you don't have to have expensive studios. Everybody basically give me a budget of 15,000 euros, and we get something done, something real, I mean, which is really competitive with a lot of professional stuff out there. So I really encourage young people to say, if you have the feeling that in your country the owners of the media are just as corrupt as the politics and the economic elites, yes, it's a good time to start your own media house, but keep in close touch with Reporter Without Borders and the IPI and those guys, because if you're successful and you are in a country where it might be pretty dangerous, but I think it could be a good thing, this shake-up of the media landscape.
Thank you, Mrs. Seifert. So now if I could just ask each of us to make a short 1 or 2 sentence final statement regarding how to protect journalists in conflict zones. And maybe I was writing down while you were making your statements, and most of you mentioned that we need action by states. We need to be united in action to actually achieve something. So if you just make a very short final statement to round this all up, maybe we'll start with you, Ms. Ribeiro.
First of all, rule of law, it's very important. At the national level, of course, the role of the government, it's again very important, but it's not only the role of the governments. Academia, civil society, they have a role to play. And of course, international organizations, despite some mistrust regarding international organizations, are very important and will be more and more important in the future. And we need young people. We need to mobilize young people also for this fight, if I may say. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kerbler?
Again, on Friday there will be the report on Press Freedom Index all over the world. So in Vienna and the Presse Club Concordia. So if you read the report, take it and talk to your friends. What does that mean, for example, when democracy weakens and vice versa? If there is less press freedom, you have the feeling, there is the truth of the numbers, and there is the truth of the feeling. And if you get the feeling that there is something changing in your country, Austria, for example, then talk about what is with press freedom. What can I do
Yes,
to make a turnaround? I mean, I don't know what is in English, Zuschauerdemokratie. You have to stand up. You have to stand up and involve yourself because it's your freedom and not the freedom of the journalists. So we should be aware things are changing in Europe, and look to Slovakia, look to Poland, look to Budapest. So we should be aware that we have to involve ourselves to keep our press freedom there where we have it now.
Thank you very much.
Or
better.
Approve it to make it better. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Difficult to say anything better than that, which is, absolutely, I agree with that it starts with us, but maybe just to add, also support journalism. Subscribe to your favorite newspaper, follow your favorite journalists, engage with them, and be part of the story, because that's where the future of journalism is. It's engagement.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rickwood?
Very simple response: punish the aggressors. Because it's too easy to kill a journalist. We're like fruit on a tree that are being plucked off. And anyway, the other thing, of course, is exactly what Frane said, which is invest in journalism, invest in journalists. And at the end of the day, don't forget, the role of journalism isn't about the individuals, it's about your future, it's about your consent for government, okay? That's the only way you're going to find out about it. You go to the polls, Polls, sorry, and you need obviously to agree or not agree with what you're voting for, and journalism is a keystone of that.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Seifert, our final statement.
Yeah, what can I do after I agree with everything that has been said? Maybe I should do what journalists are expected to do and make a headline out of it. And the headline, from what I heard from you guys, is the holiday from history is over. It's clear that we are in a rough time and we are in rough waters, so it means if the holiday from history is over, it means we need to get engaged. You can donate to journalists. Some have their Substacks. You can now, a lot of them are on public stages. You can go there and listen to what's on stage. You can subscribe to newspapers, and you can also, as you said, engage with them, engage with us. It's a communication, and I think engaged readers and engaged journalists have one thing in common. We both understand that if we, on a slippery slope and losing democracy, I mean, I've been to North Korea 3 times in my life. Not a great place to live in, and a lot of other places where there is no democracy are also not great places to live in. So even if you're in the fight for democracy out of purely egoistic reasons, it's also fine, because if you want that the light keeps on, that you get your pension, that your son is not, or your daughter is not getting, snapped from the street and incarcerated without trial, yes, let's go for it. And I think an engaged audience and journalists, we are wonderful allies for that fight. And I think it's already happening. We are in a fight.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this wonderful event, the Diplomatic Academy, club.da, and of course the Rotary Club Maria Theresia for organizing this very important event to World Press Freedom Day. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to our audience.
Thank you.
And thank you for all being here.